New phone. Okay. So the next topic we have is virtual networking. So I'm sure some of you might have already got the idea, right? Yesterday we created the virtual machine. When I created that virtual machine, so a virtual network was created with it, right? So in Azure, what is a virtual network? Right? So the okay. So the virtual network in Azure is actually just a range of IP addresses, and I cannot. We have a message. Right. So virtual network is a range of private IP addressing, and I am kind of assuming here that everyone have some knowledge about uh, public and private IP address ranges, and whatever I'm writing here is understandable. If not, you ask me. So while creating a virtual network, I'll have to specify this public IP range here, right? Um, you can use 16 as a network bits, right? Or depends on whatever we want to use, you can use it. Of course, you cannot use everything or every number. Okay, virtual network. Now, within a single virtual network, we can create multiple subnets. Okay, in a virtual, okay. Right now, since this virtual network, the range is very, very big, right? This range has almost more than 65,000 IP addresses, and we might not need this much. So what we do, we create subnets. A subnet is a smaller range of IP addresses, right? So we will create subnets, right? We can create multiple subnets depending on how much our range allows us to create. So, fine. So you can create multiple subnets in a single virtual network. Again, that depends on your requirement, how many subnets you need. So maybe you can create one subnet for your DMZ network, your what is DMZ? Demilitarized network or perimeter network. You can create one for your internal network, right? A network which is not connected to internet at all. So again, depends on your requirements. And then when we create
Chavi,
the virtual, yes, sir. Hello.
Chavi, what is this 24 is denoting here? Just
Sir,
want to know.
these numbers, the 24, 16, or the 24 number, this denotes the number of network bits in an IP address, the network part of the IP address. An IP address has two parts, right? There's a network part and there's a host part. The
Mhm.
host part specifies your, like, identifies your machine, right? Your host. The network part specifies, you can say, that switch or that router to which you are connected to. The prefix is defined there. So the 24
Okay,
is
okay, got
defining
it.
your
I got it.
prefix. Yes, the 24 is a prefix. Okay. And every subnet, whatever virtual machines you are going to create in your Azure, every virtual machine is going to get IP from that particular subnet in which you have created the virtual machine. Right? So like each of these are going to get any kind of these kind of IP addresses here. Hmm. Right? So this is how your network will be formed in the background. Whenever you will have a virtual network, your virtual network will have multiple subnets, and within those multiple subnets, you can uh, create virtual machines. Right? Again, as many virtual machines as the IP address range will allow you. Apart from this, Microsoft also allows us to add a few other things. For example, Microsoft gives us, wait, you have to squeeze this down a little bit. Okay. And this is just distorting the image. Okay. So this is not by default, although it is there, but it's up to you also if you want to use it or not. So Microsoft gives us DDoS protection, right? That is a distributed denial of service protection, so that if there are any kind of DOS attacks happening, uh, it will protect them. So DDoS protection for entire virtual network. Right now, you can only configure the DDoS protection for the entire virtual network. Right, you cannot do it for a particular subnet or like that. When you will be configuring DDoS protection, you will have options, right? But the basic one will always be there by default, right? You cannot undo that, or you cannot disable that basic by default. Also, Microsoft gives us one another option that I can now, although that was a new feature a few months ago.
Actually,
Mm,
one thing I would like to ask, what is DDoS protection?
sir, you know DOS attack?
No.
Okay, so DOS attack is a denial of service attack. Like sorry, let's say denial of service, right? So as the name says that you are not allowed to access the service. Now, the scene here is that maybe there is a hacker or someone who sends a lot of request to your server that all the resources are exhausted, right? And my spell exhausted, and it is not able to service the legitimate request, right? So the hacker will just try to consume all the resources of your server, And if there will be any legitimate request from, you can say, a valid user, the user will not be able to access the service. So this is just to shut down your services of the
Okay.
whichever company. And that is a DOS attack, right? We have here a distributed DOS attack. You can say distributed denial of service, right? When the request is made from many different machines, right? That's it. So Microsoft gives you a basic protection from the DDoS attack. Also, Microsoft has given us recently a option to put a firewall on our virtual network. Now again, the firewall is on the entire virtual network, right? Um, right. Firewall, firewall, right? On entire virtual network. So in the firewall, you can create rules, right, on which protocols and which IP addresses to allow or block, just like you do it in any normal firewall appliance. Could be software or hardware firewall. Create rules on what type of data to allow, what type of connection actually, connection to allow or deny, right? Now again, the firewall is on the entire virtual network. Now here I would like to mention that by default, every virtual network, sorry,
Savi, all these subnets what you are mentioning here are in single VLAN or different multiple VLANs?
sir, they are in a single LAN for now.
Okay.
Yes. All the subnets, I think this point will also make it clear. All the subnets by default can communicate to each other, right? There is no, by default, I'm saying, right? Just listen to my words. By default, every virtual network can communicate to every other, sorry, again, every subnet can communicate to every other subnet. Every subnet can communicate to another subnet in same virtual network. This would be the correct statement to make here, right? So if, right, if you want to restrict the communication between two different subnets, like I told you that you can create one subnet for the your internal network, or you can and you can create another subnet for keeping your private network, like your internal servers. So you have what was I saying, perimeter network and internal network, right? So what you can do is you can restrict the communication between two different subnets by using network security groups. Security groups, apply them at the level of subnets or a particular, that's another option, a particular NIC, right? That's your network interface card, NIC of a virtual machine. Okay. So where are network security groups? We will connect them. You will connect them, or you will apply them somewhere here.
अच्छा वो पेंडिंग चल रही है अपनी हुई अच्छा.
Right? So you can create a NSD here, and what do we do in NSD? We define the inbound and outbound security for that subnet, right? Now I'm sure you can understand here the difference between the firewall and the network security group, right? You can observe here that at what level am I applying the firewall, right? The red box, and at what level am I applying the NSD. Also, NSD can also be applied on a particular, let's say, a network interface card, because this IP will be given to that network interface card. Right? You have both the options. And okay, uh, let's see what I have tried to draw here. I already have created the virtual network yesterday, right? Which automatically got created when I created the virtual machine. And we will create, I'll just show you how to create a new one if you want, right? So it could be a one which I have created already, right? So you can pre-create it according to your requirements. So let's give it a name. HCL VNet 2, I guess. This will not be there already. We have HCL Net, HCL VNet. We can go with HCL VNet 2 now. And now address space has to be different. Whatever address space you have given in these virtual networks, do not use it. Okay, you can use it, but it will give you a warning that it is already overlapping. So try not to use it, right? Let's use 2 here. Okay, this is also overlapping. Nice.
Maybe one question here.
Yes,
Like
sir.
address space, so there are a lot of people around the world who are using the address spaces. So someone must have occupied
Sir,
that address space.
I said use private range, right? Not the
Mm-hmm.
public range. Are you clear with public? What is the difference between public and private IP
Yes.
addresses?
Yes.
So you just use any private range. So your network in Azure is completely isolated from my network in Azure. And yes, your point is exactly correct that there might be thousands of subscriptions all over the globe, and maybe in every subscription you will have a network of 10.1.0.0, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. So it is a private network, right? If you will, right now you are sitting in your office, if you just log on to your open your machine, run command prompt and run IP config, you will observe that your IP is also is a private IP, and it is possible that my company also is using the same range. So you can raise a question there also, right? That why isn't there a conflict where why both of our machines have the same private IP? So private IPs does not communicate on internet. If you want them to communicate on internet, you have to do NATing or maybe attach it to a router or something, right? So it's okay.
Oh,
You don't have to
okay.
really worry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, we write an address space, choose a subscription, we choose a resource group, and we choose a location. There'll be a subnet created by default with the name default. We can rename it to subnet 1. Address range, let's go with 10.3.1.0/24. And there's a DDoS protection as we talked about. So by default, basic is there. If you want to use some extra features like reporting features and some extra reporting features and application level protection is provided in the standard plan, but you have to create a standard plan specifically in Azure, and which which is a bit costly. Okay, go with the basic for now. Then you have service endpoints. So if you remember, when I was creating the storage account, there was an option to restrict the accessibility of that storage account from within a particular IP address, right, or within a virtual network. So this is that point. This is that option that I want that some storage account, or we saw Key Vault also, right? We saw Key Vault, we saw storage account, and we can also attach it to a web application, a SQL database, or Azure Active Directory. Now, if you closely observe, these all are your kind of PaaS services here. These are platform as a service. Platform as a service is any service falling under platform as a service is, sorry, is not restricted to particular IP address, right? All these services have DNS names. There is no IP address range. But still, if you want to restrict it, like the storage account should only be accessible from the IP range defined in this virtual network. So you can use this option of service endpoints. Let me just enable it and keep it like this. You can define policies. We will do it later on once we are created with this. And then you have firewall, as I was talking about in this diagram. So the outermost layer, we have a firewall, right? Again, it's an option, it's a choice. You can or cannot connect it. If you will connect it, you can provide it with a public IP address, or there will be a public IP address for sure. And let's keep it disabled for now. And then we'll create the virtual network. Okay, so that is just uh, an example that because I've created a lock, I'm not able to delete the resource. Okay, let this virtual network be created. We will see the virtual network which we created yesterday while I was creating the virtual machine, and also I used it when I created virtual machine scale set. So you can observe this here that yesterday I created a VNet of this range 10.1.0.0/16. Now, if you need as per your requirement, you can also edit. You can edit the above range also, provided it is not conflicting with the any subnet, right, or any other virtual network which you might have already created. But you can edit this, right? Um, okay, saved. And then you can create multiple subnets here. So this was the default one. If I want, I can add another subnet to it. So let's subnet 2, and I can keep this range, or I can modify range according to my requirement. And I will explain the other options in a little while. Click on OK. For now, we just define the name of the subnet and the address range which will be there. So you can create multiple subnets as I was trying to show in this diagram. And here you will be able to see the connected devices. Now, which connected devices are these? These are your network interfaces attached to your virtual machines, right? Yesterday I created the VM1, the HCL VM1 which we created. Right? HCL VM1, when you come to the networking section of the virtual machine, you will observe that it has got IP from that HCL VNet and subnet 1, and it is connected to a network interface. This is a network interface. Right. Okay. My second virtual network is ready, the one which we just created, right? It's same, although same things are there. So we have connected devices, subnets, DDoS protection is there. Basic was by default. You create a standard one. You can attach firewall later on if you want. And okay, now every virtual network in Azure or every virtual machine in Azure have their own, like Azure is giving them DNS on its own, right? They are using DNS provided Azure. If you will go to the virtual machines, I might have to start a virtual machine to see that. Let's wait for a minute for this VM to start. Okay. Right. So by default, every virtual network or every virtual machine will get its Azure DNS by default. But if you want, right? So you want that the virtual machines which are kept in, okay, not in the subnet, in this entire virtual network, right? It's not limited to a particular subnet. For the entire virtual network, I want that the DNS services should be given by a particular DNS server. So you should know the IP address of that DNS server. So you can go to the virtual network and you have the option of DNS servers here. In the DNS servers, you click on custom and then you just type the name of the IP address, not the name, IP address, the public or private, whichever IP it is. Type the IP address. Right? That's it. And you will have to do this. Your virtual machines will be restarted. So this could be a sort of a downtime for you to utilize the new DNS settings. Or you just make sure that before creating virtual machines, you're configuring this if you want to have a customized DNS server. Right. So you can configure this setting in the virtual network itself. And my VM is still starting. Let's wait. Okay. It's running, I guess, now. Scroll down and you need not start the virtual machine. Need not connect it. You can see an option here of run command. So directly from here or from the Azure portal, I can run a PowerShell script, or I'll run ipconfig. It will run ipconfig/all and run. Okay, this thing can take a few minutes. It's not like very fast, I'll say. Okay, let's see what. If you want to see all the networking components, you can go to the all services section, right? And we can see all the services which are there in the networking section. We have virtual networks, we have virtual network, we have a subnet, and then we have virtual machines inside those. Uh, okay, I hope this is clear. Mm, implementing, then you have virtual. Okay, I'm done with this. Multiple NICs in virtual machines. So you can attach multiple NICs to a single virtual machine, right? How many NICs can you attach? How many network interfaces card can a virtual machine have? Any guesses here?
8.
Okay. Okay. So 8 is the actual maximum, right? But not every virtual machine can have 8 network interfaces. So depends on depends on the size of your virtual machine. Size means that instance which we select, the number of virtual CPUs and uh, the amount of RAM, right? So you look for any in any size, okay, and this NIC information is not given in the portal itself, like it does not come on that page. This is still taking a lot of time. Okay, see here. So you select.
It was showing maximum next right side.
That's the
Maximum
last.
next.
So that will depend on what size you are choosing. Okay, right. So depends on what size you are choosing. Sorry, what size you are selecting here. Depending on that, the maximum is 8, although minimum I think 2, and there's 1 also might be in some cases. Here all are 2 only. The minimum is 2. Seen somewhere 1 also, I guess. Like 4, 8, 8. So 8 is a maximum, and just make sure you this information is not visible either in PowerShell also, nor in the in the portal, right? So
So
you can,
so in
yes.
Azure, is it compulsory to have a backup NIC as well?
So I sorry, I'm not getting you. I
Is
wasn't.
it compulsory in Azure that VMs have a backup NIC?
No, it's not compulsory. That's up to
Might be
you.
that's why it's showing me. Okay.
You're saying that's why it's showing 2.
No, might be that's why
It's
it's showing 2 NICs, minimum 2. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no, it's not a compulsion. My all the VMs are running on a single NIC. So yes,
Okay.
yes. And okay, what I wanted to show you, that by default Azure or their virtual machines is using Azure DNS server. Right. This was for the virtual machine which we created yesterday. All right. Uh, now what? So you can attach multiple NICs for sure, but again, this could be a downtime for you. Here, the NIC can only be attached in case when the virtual machine is in an off state. You cannot attach a new network interface when the virtual machine is in a running state. So you plan it before, right? Or just make sure that you should not have downtime. Right? You can attach it from here on. Okay. And then what else we have done with this? IP addresses. Okay. So we saw the private IP addresses are used in Azure. We create them using virtual network, and we can use them to connect to our on-premises network while when we use VPN gateways or express route circuit, right? We'll talk about this in the next module, the gateways and the express route circuits. And then we also have public IPs in Azure. So yesterday again, when I created this virtual machine, we saw that I got a public IP in Azure. Public IP was given to the virtual machine. Now, in Azure, when you are creating a public IP object, let's come to all services. And in the networking section, you will find public IP addresses. You can create a object. Now, the public IP address can have different SKUs. Right. So you can have basic and standard, and you can have basic and standard, or you have dynamic and static. Okay. So let's observe. Okay, so creating a new public IP instance, which IP you want? You want IPv6 or IPv4, or you want both? SKU, basic and standard. So the difference here is when you choose a basic SKU, that does not provide you the high availability option, the availability zone option. But when you select a standard one, so first they give you the availability zone option, right, which was not there in case of basic. Also, when you select a basic IP address, you can select dynamic or static. What is the difference between dynamic and static? So, okay, now I don't remember, although in the virtual machine yesterday, when I created the virtual machine, we got a public IP, right? I don't think so that the IP which is here right now, this is not the same IP which I received got yesterday. Hmm. So
The
then
IP, which is, I guess, it is assigned automatically and it will remain same, is static. And the
exactly,
dynamic, yeah. And whenever like if we have a option of DHCP server, it will assign multiple IP addresses in multiple
Ex-
sessions.
yes. So that is the difference between dynamic and static public IP. Uh, Dynamic, the public IP will change if a virtual machine starts, or if the public IP object loses the IP, it can get any other IP in case of dynamic. In case of static, the IP will stay same. Uh, but yeah, so we can go for standard or basic and dynamic. Give it a name, public IP test. You can define assignment, timeout. We can also give a DNS name to your public IPs, right? Every DNS, every public IP will have a DNS name here. And that's it. Last thing mentioned, source group and location, and click. But this object right now will not get a public IP. Actual public IP will not be given right now. You will first have to connect it to associate it, actually the correct word I use here. You can associate it to a particular nick, right? And after that, it will receive a public IP. And then you can use the public IP wherever you want. Okay. The wherever thing which I said, these are the locations where the public IPs will be used, right? So we already saw the virtual machine and the load balancer yesterday, right? And we saw that the virtual machine also got a public IP at the NIC. It was attached to the NIC. And in case of load balancer, it is a front end configuration where the client hits, and it could be both dynamic or static, right? We can choose any. The default one is always dynamic, or it depends on what SKU you are choosing, right? But default one, if you're not specifying anything, it will be dynamic, right? In case of virtual machine and load balancer. Now, we will be studying more about load balancer maybe by tomorrow. VPN gateway. So that is, we can say again, a platform as a service, a virtual kind of gateway. That gateway, okay, it is written no here, but we can have static IPs also. Dynamic, definitely. Static can also be there. Depends on what kind of gateway you are creating. Like there are some SKUs there also. So depending on the SKU, you can have dynamic or static IPs. Then application gateway, that's a layer 7 load balancer. I think I gave a bit of hint about it yesterday. It can also have a front end configuration, and again it can have dynamic or static IP if you want. Right. So okay, the same thing is written in the last also. And the private IP addresses can be linked to. Now the private IP, we saw there's a private IP given to the NIC, yes, of the NIC of the virtual machine. Could be both dynamic or static. We will study about the internal load balancer. The load balancer then can have a private IP address, static or dynamic, and application gateway can also have both dynamic and static. Okay. That is your, it won't get the IP. So you, for every public IP object here in Azure, you will have the option of associating or dissociating the public IP with the required, here we don't have the option. Here we will have the option of dissociating. Right? Dissociate so that you can use the public IP with any other NIC. Okay, let's leave it till here for now and continue the rest after lunch, if that is okay with everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so
Okay.
we will be back at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Fine. Right. Service endpoints. So that was the option which we were talking about while creating the virtual network. So I want to limit the accessibility of my, let's say, the storage account from a particular storage network only. Right? So either I can go to the virtual network. In the virtual network, we'll have option of the service endpoints, right? So either I can add service endpoint from my virtual network, or I can go to my storage account and I want to limit the accessibility of this storage account only from uh, within the virtual network. So we have option of firewalls and virtual networks. Right? So I want that this storage account should only be accessible from the HCL network. So selected networks, and I'll add my existing virtual network. Right. So I can add, let's say, the HCL VNet. So yeah, I can add multiple also, and maybe all subnets or particular subnets. So let's enable this. Right. Again, this is a choice for you, right? This is not a mandatory thing you want. Only if you really want to create a security line here, and the storage account should only be accessible from particular virtual network or particular virtual networks or your public IP, right? The public IP of your organization. So you can also add the public IP, right? So that no one else then will be able to access it from outside your public premises. Right. That was the service endpoint thing. Then, okay, that's all the service endpoint services. Right. Yes. And we discussed about DNS also, right? This is adding of a custom Azure AD domain, right? I will talk about this when I'll do Azure AD, right? So let's just wait for now. I'll do this part. Apart from this, we saw that I can configure a DNS server on the level of a virtual network. Right? Second thing which I have is configuring DNS zones. Now, so assuming here that everyone has a little bit idea about what is DNS and DNS zones, right? So you can see the service here of DNS zones. So see, definitely there's a DNS server who is hosting HCL.com, right? HCL.com is a domain name here, and there is a DNS server who is resolving all the requests for HCL.com. So similarly, I can host a DNS zone on Azure also, right? And then it will be Azure's responsibility to resolve that DNS name. So specify a resource group and just mention the domain name. Now, I am not using HCL.com. I'm using HCL1.com, right? And review plus create. So just like you buy a domain name from your domain registrar and then you create your records there, right? In on a DNS server, we create. Again, okay, I am assuming here that everyone has a little bit idea about what are resource records or DNS zones, right? If anyone has any doubt here, do ask me. Right? So I'm hosting a zone, just like we create a forward lookup zone or a reverse lookup zone in your on-premises DNS servers. Here we are creating a zone, right? There is no forward or reverse lookup here. We just have a zone, and we just have to create records here. Plus, Azure will give us name servers, name of the name servers, where they will be hosting our this zone and its records. So what you can do is you can copy the name of those name servers and write them in your on your domain registrar's DNS page wherever you're managing it, or you can do the vice versa. Let's see. This DNS zone is a public DNS service. Hmm. Right. So you can find hcl1.com. That's a DNS zone. You will now observe that they have given us name of 4 name servers. Now these are the names of 4 DNS servers hosted in Azure's data center, or in whatever Azure name servers are there, and they're hosting our hcl1.com on those servers. Right now, if you want that your domain name hcl.com should be hosted on the records should be hosted on this zone. So you can copy these names and you can go and paste it from on your domain registrar's page, wherever your HCL domain, from wherever you have got. So, and here you will have the SOA record is there, start of authority record and name server records. And now, just like you create records, you create resource records in your on-premises DNS servers, we can create record sets here. So it will be like you want to create a record. So record will be vm1.hcl1.com. That forms your FQDN. And then what type of record you want to create, like record, MX, SRV, TXT, or PTR. And we just type the name of the server or machine, and you can add multiple IP addresses here. Right? That is why we call it a record set and not a simple record. Okay. Right. And this works. How I am sure that this works. I have a live example here. So I have a domain name here. Something I bought. This is okay. This might be a weird domain name. This is ktl9.ml, and I have the name servers name of Azure, and I also have a few records created here, right? And I have a website running under this domain name. So if anyone wants to check this, right, you can use the domain name, or you can use the URL to check whether this website is actually running or not, right? So this URL, this www.ktl9.ml, I've actually created a CNAME, a canonical name record is there in the DNS zone. That's our website. Come back. come on to the DNS zone. So actually this name www.ktl9.ml, it's pointing toward a website created in Azure, which is, so this is the alias, sorry, this is the URL, and this is the actual name of the website, the URL, sorry. Right. So I have, okay. So it works, right? It works quite well. So you can host your zones, your domain name on the Azure provided DNS service. Now this is the public DNS service. There is also a private DNS service, private DNS zone. We should be able to see that somewhere here. Okay, you can see private DNS zones. Now, what is the difference between public and private? So public DNS zones is for the internet, you can say, right? Which are available publicly. The private DNS zone is only available within your Azure, only for your, actually within a virtual network, right? Or between multiple virtual networks. So let's choose a resource group, give it a name here. So let's say HCL.local. I'll just go with HCL1.net and click on review plus create. Now, once this will be created, we will be able to observe a difference between the public DNS zone and this private DNS zone. Is that the private DNS zone can be linked to your virtual networks. So automatically your virtual machines which you are creating in that virtual network will be automatically registered in this private DNS zone once you have attached or linked the virtual network to this private DNS zone. This was a public one, and you can use the name servers. So the private DNS zone can be used for any custom domain names, right? As I said, it will provide name resolution between within the one VNet also, and between different VNets. If you have linked multiple VNets, we can link multiple virtual networks to the private DNS zone. We will observe that as soon as it will be created, we will have, I will click a checkbox using which all the machines within that virtual network will automatically add themselves in the DNS, right? You know, just like, I don't know if anyone is aware about Active Directory. So there's a DNS server on that domain controller, right? So every machine which joins to the domain automatically registers its name on the DNS also. So same thing will happen as soon as a new machine is there, it will register itself in the private DNS zone here. Let's see this. So come to all services and private DNS zones, HCL.net. And you will observe, first of all, there are no name servers there, right? Because this is not public, this is a private one. So, and you have an option here of linking the virtual network. So click on add, and we will link the HCL VNet, right? This is a subscription. Which virtual network do I want to link? I want to link the HCL VNet, and click this enable auto registration so that all the virtual machines, their records will be created. Right? So you can also make communication between two different virtual networks in Azure. And this is only for intranet, right? This is not accessible from internet. That's it. And we have network security groups. Right. It will take a few minutes, few seconds actually. Come back to the overview section. And you can observe that automatically my HCL VM1 has registered itself with the IP address. Right? Now, why are the other machines not coming? Because my other machines are in a switch off state right now. So if you want them to be to also resolve the names, you have to, for example, I created the scale set yesterday. Let me just start. Sorry. It might take a few minutes, and you can link multiple virtual networks, right? You have options to link multiple virtual networks. So all the virtual networks are able to resolve names. Let's come to it in next 5 minutes. So the next thing we have are network security groups. Okay. So we discussed in this diagram that the network security group, I colored it in purple. So the network security group can be applied on a particular subnet, or it can be applied on a particular NIC, the network interface card, right, which is attached to a virtual machine. Now, let's come here. Let's see if this is done. See, right, the records are getting registered as the instances of the virtual machines are, I think they're getting switched on. right? So they are registered under the DNS name scale set something 1000.hcl1.net. Okay, so you can use this now. Come back to the virtual machine section. Okay, so yesterday when I created the virtual machine, I enabled two port numbers there, right? I enabled RD 3389 for RDP, and I also enabled port number 80 for HTTP. Now, where these two port numbers were actually enabled, they were enabled on the network security group. Automatically there was a network security group created, right? And it attached itself or associated itself to the network interface of the virtual machine, right? Now I can see them here, or we can directly go to all services and network security groups, and we'll click on the one HCL VM1 NSG. That's NSG of your virtual machine one, right? You can connect multiple network interfaces to a single NSG, right? There is no need of creating the multiple NSGs or NSG for every virtual network interface, right? You can have one for a particular subnet although. No need of creating it for every interface. So we have the inbound security rules and the outbound security rules. Now, the first thing which you might observe here is that there are three default rules created in both inbound and outbound security rule, right? The last three rules, if you remember, or if you can see this. Now, the last rule here, both in outbound and inbound, is denying all the connections, right? We can see here any port number, any protocol, any source, and any destination. So the communication is blocked. Now, why am I still able to do the RDP? Because of the priority. Now, in case of NSG, lower the number, higher the priority. That's why you can see that the RDP rule has the lowest number here. And so the priority is high, right? So lower the number, higher the priority here. And so you have to follow this rule while creating any rules in NSG, right? And same in outbound. And we cannot delete these default rules, right? You won't get an option to delete them, but you can definitely override them by creating a higher priority rule. So how to create a rule? So it's as simple as it seems here. You click on add, and you can define the source from where the communication is coming. Now, what kind of source do you want? Any, or maybe you want to allow traffic from any particular IP address or IP address range. Source could also be any Azure service, right? Like it could be internet, or it could be any other service in Azure, like a load balancer or a monitoring service or cognitive service, a front door service, or it could be services specific to a region, right? Like a storage account in East Australia East, or a SQL server in East US, or a key vault in somewhere in India, or a Cosmos DB in a particular region. So you can define the source, like from where the request is coming, and you define the source port number. Like by default, star is there, and then you define the destination where the service has to go. Um, Destination port number, protocol, and you define the action. define the priority, right? Just make sure the priority is higher than or a number is lower than this, right? Only then the priority will be higher. Give it a name. I'm going with the default settings here, and we click on that. That's it. The same way, you can create a outbound rule also. It's exactly the same. So no such change there, right? And then what do? We go to the net. We associate a particular network security group with maybe one or multiple network interfaces. Right. Getting the option. Okay, why I'm not getting any option? Because all of these are already associated, right? Already associated with another network security group, so I cannot associate them here. And the other level where I can apply the network security group is at the subnet level, right? Now, in this diagram, you can observe what is the level. Right? You can observe. So, applying it at the subnet means applying it at all the virtual machines within this subnet, or applying it at a particular NIC. So, you can understand the difference here. So you associate it with the subnet as well. Which virtual network, and then the virtual network to which subnet you want to associate it. It depends, right, how you want to restrict or allow the communication. That's it. Now, what I have done, I have actually applied the NSD at both the levels. I have applied it on subnet also, and this one is also applied on a particular network interface. Right? Now I have applied the same NSD. What if you have applied two different network security groups? Right? Is it a possibility that there are some conflicting rules? So what we can do is we can go to the effective security rules. For this security group, for this virtual machine, we just have one interface card. What will be the effective security rules which will be associated with this virtual network interface? Okay, it's going to take some time, I guess. Okay, I'm hoping this is clear now. Rules, right? Effective rules. Still taking some time. Creating the rules, and that's it. That was your fourth module, I guess. Right. Okay. So, which one will communicate to which and which one will not communicate to which? Okay. You can see the effective security rules here. Right. So, which virtual network can communicate to which virtual network and which one cannot communicate?
VNet 1 can communicate with VNet 2 and VNet 3 with VNet 4
Okay.
because they are both are in the same private network, same range.
So, which one is same range?
VNet 1 and VNet 2.
Okay. But their network ID is different, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. That is 10.10.1 and second one 10.2. Yeah.
So, now which one can communicate and which one cannot? Anyone else?
VNet 1 and VNet 2 will communicate, and VNet 3 and VNet 4 will.
Okay, fine. Okay. So, none of the virtual networks can communicate to other virtual networks
And they
by
need a router, I guess.
default. Yes.
They need
By,
router.
by default, there will be no communication, right? The communication is only there within the virtual network. There is no communication outside the virtual network by default. Okay. So now what will we do? Okay, so how to make them communicate? right? So this introduces us to the concept of peering in Azure. Now, these two virtual networks, VNet1 and VNet2, right? Doesn't matter what is the address space here, right? They will not communicate to each other until and unless I am configuring peering here. So in Azure, we have concept of configuring regional peering, right? Regional peering. So VNet 1 will be able to communicate to VNet 2. Also, VNet 1 can communicate to VNet 3. Again, you can configure regional peering here, right? And the same will go for VNet 2 to VNet 3 also. Configure regional peering there as well, and then they can communicate to each other, right? Yeah, this was and then I have a virtual network in another region, right? This is West US. This is entirely a different facility, miles and thousands of miles away, actually. Like, I don't know, hundreds or what, but thousands of miles away from East US. So there also we can have the communication, but this communication will be called as global peering, right? There was a time when global peering didn't existed. Almost a year ago it was not there, but now we have it. So also these two virtual networks, they can also talk again using global peering, right? So this is a peering concept. How to make sure whether this is working or not. You can just try to make communication between both the virtual machines. Let's come here and we'll come to the virtual machines. Okay, sorry. Come to the virtual networks and HCL VNet. Scroll down, you'll be able to see the peerings section. Right? From here, we configure the peering. Right? So we simply have to click on add, and we have to name the pairing. Like I can pair to, let's say, from HCL VNet to any other VNet which I have. Let me pin it to VNet 1 which I have. So HCL VNet to VNet 1 pairing, and I will pair it to which virtual network? VNet 1. And just observe, this virtual network is in another resource group. That doesn't really matter. The location has to be, okay, location can also be different. In that case, it will be global peering. But this page or these configurations here are not going to tell you whether it's a regional peering or a global peering, right? This is just a concept in the background, you can say. And this will also create an object in the another virtual network with this name, which I'm specifying here now. So in this virtual network, it will be HCL VNet 1, HCL net, HCL VNet hyphen VNet 1. And let me just copy this and we paste it here so we have a better. I'm configuring this pairing here. Let me show it in red. And this name, VNet 1 hyphen HCL VNet. This will be configured on the second virtual network, right? This or that, same thing. And now, then we have some options here which says configure virtual network access settings. So do you want that only the virtual machines in this VNet should be able to communicate to this virtual machines, or you want these machines also to send traffic to this virtual network, right? So you can enable both the things here, although both are enabled. Virtual network access from HCL VNet to VNet 1 and from VNet 1 to the HCL VNet. Then forwarded traffic settings. So the traffic which is actually not originating in the peered virtual network, right? But it is coming from the outside. Do you want that traffic to be sent to the peered virtual network? So you can enable or disable that. By default, it is disabled. If you want, you can enable it. So, and then we have one more option, which I will explain you in next 5 to 10 minutes. So let's click on OK here. And you will observe a pairing will be created here, and another pairing will be on the another virtual network, right? One is here with this name, another will be here, here, right? And you can try to see whether they are working or not by trying to maybe ping the virtual machines whether they're communicating or not, right? This is one concept. So now I've paired these two virtual networks, right? So that was the concept of pairing. Now what else do we have? Okay, so I said earlier, before almost a year ago, there was no option such as global pairing. Means that there was no option I can make. I was able to do pairing between virtual networks in two different regions like East US and West US, right? So at that time, the option which we had was to configure VNet to VNet VPN. Okay, so how to configure VPN? We'll talk about VPN now. Intersite connectivity. Okay, I hope peering is clear for now at least. You have global peering and you have regional peering. So basically, the communication is happening from the backbone, right? From Azure's backbone, and we need not worry about that, right? It's easy to set up, seamless data transfer, and performance is good, right? Global pairing might bring with it some limitations, right? Like you cannot control how the traffic is flowing in case of global pairing, right, from one location to another. So if you want to control that, then you might want to configure a VPN. For that, you will need extra resources, although. And here we will be talking about this diagram. And Where am I storing these files? That's your on-premises data center. And here we have the Azure infra. Right? So now let's just observe what they have created and what are they trying to show us with this type. Yes. Okay. Now, so we have three virtual networks here. You can observe this. This is VNet A, this is Hub VNet, and this is VNet B. Right? These are three different virtual networks. Now, as I said, there is no communication between any virtual network, irrespective of their region. So, what they have done is they did peering between VNet A and Hub VNet, and they did peering between VNet B and Hub VNet. So now VNet A and Hub VNet can communicate, and VNet B can also communicate to Hub VNet. Now, the peering concept does not involve transitivity. Transitivity means if VNet A can communicate to Hub VNet and Hub VNet can communicate to VNet B, so can VNet A communicate to VNet B? No. This is not possible, or maybe you will have to enable that forwarding option if you want it to work, right? Now, then what their requirement was in Hub VNet, if you observe, they have created some virtual machines, right? They might have some virtual machines here, and they might have some virtual machines in this subnet also. They wanted, now there are many virtual machines here, right? It's not just two virtual machines. There might be like 200 virtual machines. Now, are you going to give public IP to all the 200 virtual machines? No, right? That might not be feasible, and it's not a best practice as well to give public IPs to every virtual machine in Azure. So, what is the workout? How to do this? How not to have 200 IP addresses, and how to keep the connection private, right? And not through internet. So, what they do that they create a VPN gateway. Now, the VPN gateway in Azure is yet another service. Although we do not call it VPN gateway, we call it virtual network gateway. Now, a VPN gateway in Azure has a public IP. So this VPN gateway here will have a public IP, the VPN gateway. Oh, okay, it's not gone. Now, so all these virtual machines can be accessed in this particular hub VNet using the public IP of the gateway, right, or of the VPN gateway. Now, what you can do is there will definitely be okay, I don't need, I need a server. So we might definitely have a router in our on-premises, right? Or something which will have a public IP here. So let's say I have my on-premises public IP. Public IP belong to this, maybe the router on the public endpoint or whatever you have on the external. Now, you can configure a VPN, right, between these 2 points. This is actually we called a site to site VPN, which you will configure between the VPN gateway created in Azure and your on-premises public point. Now, anyone from your on-premises can access any virtual machines in this particular hub VNet. You might have to configure your routing table in such a way that that you can access the VMs. Also, you will have to plan that the private IP range of your internal in your on-premises internal environment should not overlap with the virtual network range you are using in Azure, right? Because if it will overlap, that could be a problem. Because if the range is same, maybe your routing table which you will create, it might get confused where it actually has to go. So you have to plan this out before creating this VPN, and also even creating before this virtual network. Right. Okay. So we can do this. So this much is done. Now the requirement comes that from my on-premises, I also need to access the virtual machines in this subnet, which are in VNet B. But I can only access hub VNet from the gate through gateway. Gateway is only attached to hub VNet. So I can only access the virtual machine in this hub VNet. I cannot access the virtual machines in VNet B. So how to do that? Now, one solution is that you deploy another gateway here. Then you again configure another VPN from VNet B to your on-premises DC. But that will have an extra cost. You will have a cost of extra gateway, one extra public IP, and then there will be extra traffic of VPN and connections to your another gateway. So you either use that, or the another solution you have is that you configure these options in your peering. It says allow gateway transit. This is the same option, which we saw while configuring the VPN. Okay, I'm going to clear this. Can you see this option here? Allow gateway transit and use remote gateway, and this is totally disabled right now. Now, what does these options do? So, allow gateway transit. See, where am I enabling it? Allow gateway transit. I'm enabling it on that virtual network where the gateway is configured. Okay? Gateway can be attached to one virtual network. So I will enable the gateway transit option in the peering configured on this virtual network. And I'm instructing this gateway that please allow the traffic to pass from the peered virtual network. And also I will instruct the VNet B that you can go and use the remote gateway of your peered virtual network. So the traffic can flow from here to here, right? That will be the flow of your traffic. So like this, you won't have to deploy another gateway in VNet B, or you won't need another public IP in VNet B. Right? And you can also do the same thing for VNet A as well, or what they have actually done is they have configured UDR, user defined routing. And they have just created some customized routing rules or customized routing table in Azure, and they are making the communication possible using UDRO. Okay, so we will see a VNet gateway now, how to create it and what are the options. Creating a gateway in Azure can take almost 45 minutes, right? But generally it gets created within 35 minutes depending on what is the configuration of your gateway. Right? So let's create a gateway, and then we will see that we will be able to enable this gateway transit option. Let's come to all services, and we will see in networking we have virtual network gateways. So this is called virtual network gateways, right? It's not called VNet, VPN gateway or something like that. Click on add. And after this is created, then I'll try to explain you one or two more scenarios or what else we can do using this gateway. Now, this gateway is one example of the dependency on a resource group or the location of the resource group. So just like we do every time, we choose a subscription, and then to choose a resource group, it says select a virtual network first. So you can observe that there's a dependency here. So I will first have to go and select a virtual network, and I cannot find any. Why? Because my region is Canada Central. Where was my virtual network? It was in East US. So in East US, I have a virtual network called HCL VNet. Okay, one, you will observe that they are saying a gateway subnet address range. So actually what is happening in the background, Azure is just deploying a virtual machine for you, right? Trying to configure a virtual router for you there. So a machine is getting deployed in the background. So that's why what we need to do is need to create a gateway subnet in Azure within the same virtual network, right? We have to create a gateway subnet. The name of that subnet is hard coded. It has to be gateway subnet only, right? Azure will not allow you to change that name. So you will just observe here that HCL VNet, it will create a gateway subnet of this range. You can decide what range you want, because of course you are not going to have like 20 gateways or 20 machines there, right? So you can keep it as small as you want. Like maybe I can keep it 27, so I'll have only 32 addresses. I can also get 20 addresses are more than enough for me. Okay, so selected the virtual network. Based on the virtual network, the resource group will be decided. Decide the gateway, gateway 01, or you can give it a name, gateway. Right. Region, gateway type, so you want a VPN or you want express route. So what is VPN? VPN is a virtual, okay, that's a full form, although virtual private network. So it's a point to point connection, right? Point to point means like from one computer to another computer. There will be a virtual tunnel, right? Which will try to encrypt and secure the communication between two machines. Right? So you can either use VPN, and of course the connection will go through internet, when you are using VPN. Now, if not VPN, we have the another option here, and the option is of express route. Right? We'll talk about express route. Let me start to create this gateway because it's going to take some time. Then we'll have time to talk. For now, express route is a private, dedicated connection from your data center to Azure's data center, right? And not going from internet. So it's like private line, like a WAN link, which will involve a service provider in between, like Airtel or Vodafone or Tata Communications. Okay, for now, we'll go through VPN. VPN type, go with route based, right? Where you can configure routes, and then depending on the routing table, the communication will happen. In policy based, first of all, the options are very limited. Only one SKU is there, basic SKU, which does not allow you to have more than one tunnel, more than one site to site tunnel. Without which you will have many different SKUs. Also, policy based allows you to create like policy based connection based on the IP prefixes, whether can I want to allow connection or not based on the IP address. Go with route based. SKUs, again, SKUs are defining the number of connections which your VPN can have, and they are also defining the, what are they defining? Okay. Number of connections and bandwidth, right? That is what they're defining. Also, the SKUs are defining that what kind of IP address your your virtual gateway will have. So if you see right now, I am on VPN gateway 1, VPN GW1, and if you scroll down, it says that I can only connect basic public IP and will have a dynamic address, right? Or if you want to have static, and I'm sure you might want to have a static one. So for the static one, you just choose another gateway here. It's still basic. Okay, select the AZ one. This will be static. Okay. Okay. Now you observe. Now the public IP SKU is standard. It means, and see, I have the option of availability zone also now. So this option was not given to me earlier. So these SKUs will define different feature sets, what kind of public IP availability zone you need. Right?
What's the full form of SKU?
SKU means stock keeping unit. That's what we call it. It's just defining the types of, you can say, types of service you can have. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Select SKU here, and virtual network, public IP. So let's say public IP gateway 1. Then do you want to enable active mode? If you have more than one gateway, would you want to have active mode, right? So that both are enabled, or one is at standby and like active passive or active. And do you want to configure your autonomous system number, ASN, of your BGP? I think our networking people can understand this better. Okay. So you configure all the selections and we click on create. So apart from this example, we also have, let's see, what else we have. What other things you can configure using this gateway? What are the type of connections you can configure? Okay, so that is one site-to-site connection which you can have using the gateway. So you have a virtual network in Azure, and you have attached a VPN gateway, just like we did, right? This is the public IP of your virtual network gateway, and this is your on-premises. That is your internal network's IP range, and this is the public IP of your on-premises environment. And you can deploy a IPsec. The protocol used here will be IPsec IKE, Internet Key Exchange Protocol, and it will form a site-to-site VPN. Then any user or anything from your on-premises, any user can communicate to this virtual network in Azure. What other options do we have? So that is the okay. So that is yet another kind of tunnel, right? This is called VNet to VNet. This was used instead of your global peering when global peering was not there. And if you have two virtual networks, one in East US and one in West US, so how they used to establish the communication? Used to attach two gateways, one gateway to each virtual network, right? And every virtual network gateway will have the public IP. Right? Same here also. And then they used to deploy the VNet to VNet. This is called VNet to VNet communication. Although this is also kind of site to site only. The difference is that your two sites are Azure site only. It's not your one on-premises site. So you can establish this kind of communication as well. And lastly, and this, okay, that is your policy based and policy based and route based communication. And you can have a point to site communication. This is point to site. So again, you have a virtual network in Azure, you have a gateway attached to it, and the gateway has a public IP. And now what you have done, there is a VPN client. There's a client application which every user can download on their local machines. It could be any kind of local machine. And when they run that application, it will create a point to site SSTP tunnel. The protocol here uses SSTP, the secure store tunneling protocol, where we use a certificate for authentication. You can also use IKEV2, Internet Key Exchange version 2 protocol. You also have option of using OpenVPN here. OpenVPN using SSL. So we can use configure point to site. But in point to site, what is the difference between point to site and site to site? In point to site, every single user is creating a individual tunnel from his machine to Azure's virtual net. Right? And in case of site to site, you can connect the entire site. All the connections are going through a single tunnel there. Right? And in case of site to site, there was a public IP at the on the on-premises end. Here, there is no public IP on the other end. Every client machine has its own private IP range. Right? Okay, let's clear this and come back. Okay, so it's already how much time? Right? Okay, it's only 6 minutes for now. It's going to take much more. Right. Okay, it's not opening. Okay, so once my gateway is created, I will be able to show you how to enable the gateway transit option on your peering and both these options. And we configured pairing, service chaining, again, the same diagram which we did. Right. VNet to VNet connections, okay, they are just explaining how to configure, create, how to create and configure the gateway and then the VPN. Right. Creating the gateway subnet, you can create it before also, or if you observed, for me it was it will create automatically while I'm configuring the gateway. Create VPN types. Okay, this is a bit of old sheet, right? You will be able to observe here that different type of gateways are supporting different number of connections, and also the throughput, or the, you can say, the bandwidth is also different. uh, you can see a updated list here because they have increased the number of SKUs. I have, don't know, this is here. Right. So you can have a look on this. How the maximum speed which your this, okay, although that speed is for it is for express route, you have up to speed up to 10 Gbps. If you're using VPN gateway 5, you can have up to 10,000 P2S, IKEV2 or Open VPN connections and 10 Gbps of connections. Some of these routes are also for, sorry, SQs are also for express route. Okay. You can refer this table while deciding to create or choose any VPN gateway. Right. Okay. Process.